Washington, the McLaughlin Group, the American original. For over 3 decades, the sharpest minds, best sources, hardest talk.
Issue 1. No justice, no peace.
There has been a vicious, calculated, and despicable attack on law enforcement. Police in Dallas were on duty during doing their jobs, keeping people safe during peaceful protests.
4 Dallas police officers and 1 Dallas area rapid transit officer were killed Thursday night when gunmen ambushed them in downtown Dallas. 6 other officers were shot and wounded. The officers had been providing security for a protest over the video that recorded police-involved deaths of 2 black men in Louisiana and Minnesota this week. President Obama expressed anger over those shootings, stating, quote, "Speaking out about the issue is not an attack on police," end quote. But FBI Director James Comey believes law enforcement officers are under siege.
Some part of the explanation is a chill wind that has blown through law enforcement over the last year. And that wind is surely changing behavior.
Is FBI Director Comey right?
Well, he's talking about the Ferguson Effect, which is after Ferguson and the attacks on the police as racist, etc. They've backed off tough policing, John, and crime has really had a spike. But far more important here is what happened in Dallas, where those 5 policemen were murdered in a racist attack, and the individual said he was killing them because they were white and because they were police. And it is an enormous atrocity, and it follows, and the President of the United States obviously condemned it, but the day before, there were 2 killings, or this week 2 killings, of basically innocent black men who were armed but had committed no crime, and they were shot by police in incidents which are really being investigated, and rightly so. But what I fear is going to come out of this is a massive polarization of the country. We're going to have a full week, I think, as we had after Orlando in that nightclub where that massacre occurred. This is the worst slaughter of police officers in my memory, I think in my lifetime. So I think it's going to polarize the country, and I think President Obama is going to be on one side of it, and frankly, if you will, the conservatives and the traditionalists and maybe the Trump folks are going to be on the other. Trump hasn't spoken as of now, but I don't see how we're going to get past a major blow-up over this in the society.
Well, when you talk about the president being on one side or the other, I mean, how do you divide the sides here? The police in Dallas were doing their job. They were protecting the protesters and the rightful, what we all have to protest. So I don't think there are, good people here and bad people. There's somebody who seemed to take his dastardly emotions into his own hands. We'll learn more about what's happened in Dallas. But I think when you heard the news out of Dallas and you heard Parkland Hospital, you thought 1963, President Kennedy's assassination, and then this year with the polarization, the country is already polarized. It feels a lot like 1968, where you had this sort of foreboding about what might happen next. You correctly point out the 2 innocent black men were basically slaughtered in 2 American cities this week, and then you had people rightfully speaking out and expressing their anger. And so that has to be dealt with as well. And I think FBI Director Comey, the remarks that John just aired, go back to last October. A lot has happened even since then. But this is a time when the nation needs its leaders. We need to respect the FBI director, and we need to respect our president, who will and should be speaking out about this.
I think there are a few issues going on here. Obviously, I speak to young black friends, and there is this belief and perception, in some sense, drives reality in a democracy, that they worry about their interactions with police officers. Mm-hmm. At the same time, however, if you look at the statistics, the 75 biggest counties in America, 15% black population, 62% robberies committed by black men predominantly, 45% assault, and 57% murders. So there is a a key problem in black communities in America. What can we do immediately that I think can improve matters? Well, number one, we have those robust investigations of shootings that look very bad, but let the evidence play its course. Number two, immediately, and I think this should happen within a month, is that we have body cameras on police officers so that interactions with members of the public are investigated and that people begin to feel that greater confidence.
Well, I agree with you on the body cameras, certainly, and promoting them. And funny coincidence down there in that Louisiana episode, both body cameras fell off, conveniently so that they did not record anything, but it was outside cameras that picked up on that horrible episode. Also, President Obama, in his address from Warsaw, his remarks, talked about those statistics and pointed out that several studies have shown that black folks and Hispanics get heavier sentences for the same crimes. They get patrolled a lot more. They get stopped and frisked a lot more, et cetera, et cetera. And I can tell you, being the father of a young man in his 20s right now, who when he was 7 wanted to be a police officer, and now I have to talk to him about, look, all cops aren't bad, because this is, it's not a perception for young black males. It's a reality that they're going to be treated differently.
Stop and frisk, and that's correct. But the Hispanics commit violent crimes at 3 times the rate of white Americans, and blacks commit violent crimes at 7 times the rate.
Tell me about the income breakdown on that.
Well, listen,
because as you know, crime is committed by poor folks.
But
there's a bigger proportion of poor folks.
But the point is, there are more poor white folks in the country than there are total poor black folks. But Clarence, this is why. But let me say this: I think the difference here is it was a tragedy in those white cops. Neither of those went out that morning and said, "I'm going to kill a black guy."
Right.
They got in an encounter with a black guy. One of them said, "I got a gun." This guy shot him and killed him when he hadn't pulled out the gun. There's a difference between a tragedy and an atrocity. And this atrocity is when that guy went up there with that rifle. He came into town and he came out to kill white cops, and he was inspired by Black Lives Matter, and he killed 5 of them and he wounded 6 of them. Yeah. And I can tell you this.
You talked about the 2 different sides. You just expressed one side. You're focusing on you're cherry picking facts on one side. You'd also have the governor of Minnesota who said, would that man have been shot in his car if he were white? Conversely, if that policeman were black, would he have shot a white passenger? I mean, you can't deny the racial disparities that are in this country. They're more visible now because of social media, and the woman who had the presence of mind to record that, it's heartbreaking to listen to her grief, but she sure did the right thing in accounting what happened to her.
It ought to be investigated, but I think you got to agree that cop did not go out that morning. He went up there, he had a tail light knocked off.
Pat, I agree with you.
The guy says, "I got a gun."
Pat, the tragedy of that whole episode. The tragedy of that episode, number one, nobody deserves to be killed for a broken tail light. Number two, that police officer, look at that video. That officer was completely freaked out. He was losing control emotionally.
Well,
and unfortunately, that leads to tragedy, and that's what happened. Well, yeah, but on camera, though, he was freaked out.
He was.
And I talked to a couple of police officer friends of mine, and they said he shouldn't have been on duty condition like that. And somebody like that, you take them off duty for at least a day or two.
But you're talking about a tragedy.
Yeah, it's tragedy, right.
But what happened in Dallas was not a tragedy.
I'm not going to join you in blaming Black Lives Matter for all this, Pat. I mean, I got my disagreement with Black Lives Matter too, beginning with their name.
They say, what do we want?
I'm not going to blame them for this. They are not ISIS.
Here's what they say. What do you want? What do we want? Dead cops. When do we want them? Now.
Some of them say that.
They've marched in New York.
That's the problem. They're a hashtag movement, like the Tea Party. They don't have a leadership.
We all need to be mindful of our rhetoric, and I must say I'm grateful that Donald Trump put out a very graceful tweet expressing his sympathy and canceled his campaign events. So he did not jump on this and use this to exploit divisions in the country. And maybe that's a small sign that our political leaders are going to lead us in the right way in the weeks and months ahead.
Issue 2, Clinton-Comey campaign.
We cannot find a case that would support bringing criminal charges on these facts. All the cases prosecuted involved some combination of clearly intentional and willful mishandling of classified information or vast quantities of information exposed in such a way as to support an inference of intentional misconduct, or indications of disloyalty to the United States or efforts to obstruct justice. We do not see those things here.
Attorney General Loretta Lynch this week accepted the FBI's recommendation that Hillary Clinton not be charged with mishandling classified information, and she closed the case. Director Comey distanced himself from a recent meeting between A.G. Lynch and Bill Clinton and criticized Mrs. Clinton and her staff as, quote unquote, extremely careless for sending classified material over non-governmental email servers. But on the GOP side, the case is not over yet, calling congressional hearings and suggesting other sanctions against Clinton. Is Hillary home free? Clarence.
No, she's not home free as long as the Republicans are around who want to hang her up one way or the other. I think they're going to go for contempt of Congress now, charging that she lied before Congress. But it'll be something or other that's going to be out there. And also, her public relations image just suffered badly this week. After you've been called careless with national security, it's an awkward position right before the convention where you're to be nominated for president. But I suspect she will survive.
Oh, she will survive, more than survive. The Republicans are now going to investigate the investigation. They're going to investigate how the FBI director did his investigation. And if they want to get at Hillary, they have to go through James Comey, who is 6'8". He's a pillar of independence. He's a former Republican, now registered as an independent. I think he did a good job. He said enough damning things about Hillary that the Republicans should be satisfied with that. Instead, they got to push it further, say as a presumptive Democratic nominee, she shouldn't get security briefings. That is not going to happen. But and they're trying to impeach her before she even gets into the Oval Office.
Let me talk about Comey. What Comey did, he said, I'm not going to recommend an indictment or a prosecution. But what he did was devastating. Without saying Hillary Clinton was lying, he went out and made statement after statement after statement that she said that was flatly contradicted by the facts. He made the case, if she were going to be indicted, to convict her. But then he said, and I think, and I'm going to say this, I think correctly, what he was saying in effect is, I'm not going to decide this election by recommending an indictment, which would be the end of Hillary Clinton. I'm going to let the people. I'm going to let the people decide this election. You think here's the arguments, here's the evidence. The American people, you decide.
Here's the situation: is that
he went by the facts.
He cannot, as a law enforcement officer, he has got a lot. Prosecuting on the gross negligence charge, it requires a degree of malice intent under the law, under the precedent. But what he has said pretty clearly, and you can see the disgust, is that Hillary Clinton, and it is vested by the facts in the contradiction between what she said and what has been said by the FBI, is a pathological liar. So on one side we have Hillary Clinton the liar, on the other side we have Donald Trump the clown. And again, the American people will make that determination, but I think a special point here, two things: the Clinton Foundation, he didn't say in the congressional testimony, he wouldn't answer whether there's a separate corruption probe underway there, and secondly, if you look at what has happened with the Clinton security clearance issue, if she was a government employee, she would lose her clearance.
She would lose her job
I
and
didn't
lose her
hear a word
security
about
clearance.
pathological liar. What I heard was no reasonable prosecutor would bring this case. There is no evidence of obstruction of justice or lying to the FBI. These would be crimes, and I think he handled this appropriately. About careless use of emails. Extremely careless use. I mean, that's like jaywalking compared to everything Donald Trump has put out there.
But what he said, your conclusion from what he said was that Hillary has lied from beginning to end about this.
That's your interpretation, Pat. That's not what he said.
If she wins, the security risk is going to be running the armed forces of the United States.
You actually believe Hillary Clinton would be a security risk if she were in the White House?
She doesn't handle our secrets well.
Oh, please.
What's the point?
She handles her own secrets.
That's what got her into trouble here, frankly.
John.
What's the point on Trump?
What's the point on Trump? That the distrust of him and whether he is capable to be the president of the United States and lead this country is not high. And if people are forced to choose between Trump and Hillary, as the president said, it's chicken or fish. There's no vegetarian option unless you want to go for the libertarians. So there actually is a libertarian option. But a lot of people are going to support Hillary because they can't abide Donald Trump.
Speaking of lying, Donald Trump makes a hobby out of it. I mean, it's like part of his language when he gets up and speaks. And the crowd seem to enjoy it. They know he's lying.
I mean, it has entered the domain of the campaign now, and that's the opportunity of the American people to decide.
That's right.
That hangs on this exit question. My learned remark. Will Hillary Clinton be exonerated in the court of public opinion? Yes or no?
No, there she's been convicted.
If you define exonerated by she's the likely next president, I will say yes.
I think she's been indicted as a liar, but she has been saved by the fact that prosecutors must only prosecute where they have a confidence of reasonable doubt, conviction, and he couldn't do that.
You know, when you got a choice between bad and worse, people will go for bad. I think that's what's happening with Hillary Clinton.
What an optimistic
She's
statement.
she's a far better.
Am I lying?
No, you're not. I don't think
Thank
you
you.
are.
She's a
Be
far
realistic.
better person and public servant than the remarks here would indicate.
And better than Donald Trump.
And a lot better
No
than
question.
Donald Trump.
Issue 3, ISIS existential fight.
People came to buy clothes to celebrate Eid. Now they're buying coffins. They're buying coffins. May God punish those who are responsible.
As the Islamic holy month of Ramadan ended, ISIS launched bloody attacks that killed 350 people across several countries. The U.S., Turkey, Iraq, Bangladesh, and surprisingly, ISIS attacked Saudi Arabia's holy city of Medina. Still, some believe ISIS's terrorism campaigns are less about the group's power and more about its weakness. In recent months, ISIS has lost 45% of its territory in Iraq, 20% of its territory in Syria. Now it faces the loss of oil production revenues. So ISIS leaders are slashing salaries for fighters, taxing their people, kidnapping, even for small ransoms. Is ISIS near defeat, Tom?
No, because they've moved towards a terrorist. I read a piece, 3 observations on the Baghdad bombings a couple of months ago, talking about how under more pressure territorially, yes, and because we have special operations forces now taking that impact, President took way too long to authorize that, but he has now, and good. But the problem is this terrorism campaign. With the Europeans returning, the terrorism threat in Europe is very significant, and because their ISIS banner has so much credibility still, losers like Omar Mateen in Orlando are inspired to create those attacks. And so I think what we have to do is, number one, things like Al-Qaim, which is the border crossing with Iraq and Syria, the Anbari tribes there, if we gave them arms to take that back, that would be positive. But the president won't do that at the moment because he's worried about upsetting the Iranians.
John, here's what's happening in Mosul and Raqqa. ISIS is being squeezed, it's losing territory, and it may very well lose its caliphate over a period of time, but the disease has metastasized and it's spread to various places. And what they're doing now is very costly, pointed lone wolf and wolf pack attacks in various places to ignite division and all the rest of it. And you've got enough of these fighters around that I think these folks are going to be around visiting us in the West many, many years.
And it doesn't even have to be their fighters necessarily that they're imported to this country. As you pointed out, it's the lone wolves and it's people just trying to wrap themselves in this supposed glory. And as long as they're willing to kill innocent people in what we call soft targets, a democracy is full of soft targets. It's not hard to do. Even what happened in Dallas, you get a long gun and you go on a rooftop or you hide behind a pillar. Unfortunately, this country is susceptible to that. And in the past, things like this come typically in bursts and maybe they kind of burn out. But I think this is going to be with us for the foreseeable future. It's terrifying. And again, we need to hear from our leaders to help us put this in perspective.
Yeah, President Obama didn't use the term long, hard slog back when he described this current strategy, but he did say it was going to take a long time.
Wasn't it?
That was Rumsfeld in Iraq.
Right.
But it is the same kind of strategy. Now, in terms of, it's going to be a long game, not a short one, but we can see 40% of ISIS territory lost already. They gained at a time when they were getting virtually no resistance and just rolled through blitzkrieg style. They are being pushed back. That's why they are touching off other explosions around that region and around the planet, for that matter, if they can. But I think we still got to go after the head of the snake, though, because then you won't even have the inspiration for attacks like we saw here in Florida and in California.
We have to make them look like losers.
Yeah, losers, yeah, exactly.
And if they lose the caliphate, they will.
Here's a sharp question for you. Is ISIS, on the defensive or offensive in Iraq? Pat?
It's on the defensive in Iraq. It's lost Ramadi and it's lost Fallujah. But it has counterattacked in various places against American-backed rebels and things. But I think if they get the act together, if folks get the act together, I think Mosul will eventually fall. And I think the caliphate's going to fall, and that will remove the center and the cause. But I still think the metastasized elements, we're going to see them a long time.
Right.
I closely agree with Pat on that. I just worry about the European cells. That's a big problem. But
they're cut off from central leadership.
No, the answer to the question is that the Ramadan terrorist attacks by ISIS are a sign of strength or weakness to that question. The answer is neither. They're a sign of evolving tactics and an adaptive enemy as ISIS adjusts to counter U.S. tactics in Iraq and Syria. Issue 4, a new wall, new floor, new attitude.
We're going to take the necessary steps to attack the attackers and to defend those who need to be defended.
Israel is preparing to build a $600 million, 40-mile-long concrete underground wall. The new wall will surround the Palestinian-controlled Gaza Strip and is designed to stop terrorist infiltration through tunnels. Also this week, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu traveled to the African nations of Uganda, Kenya, Rwanda, and Ethiopia, offering arms sales and counterterrorism advice. In return, Mr. Netanyahu wants these nations to give Israel greater diplomatic support at the UN. Mr. Netanyahu is also boosting funding for Israeli settlers on the Palestinian-owned West Bank, considered illegal under international law. And note this, international donors are working with Israel and Palestinians on a proposal to construct a $5 billion island off the Gaza coast. The idea is that the island would provide the locale for an airport, hotel, and seaport that would attract economic investment for Palestinians in Gaza. Question, what should we expect from the Quartet's latest Middle East peace initiative? Clarence.
Well, I don't expect much, but I'm fascinated by this idea of the island, though, because this would be a public-private partnership to generate some independent economic development for Gaza and get, in the long run, what Netanyahu really wants, which is contentment with the status quo. He's continuing to build more settlements in the West Bank, and Gaza continues to be a problem on every level. And I think this fits in with his agenda, but not necessarily what the rest of the quartet wants, the U.S., Russia, and the European Union. So we'll see.
But I don't expect anything, John, for this reason that, look, whatever the European wants, the French are in the lead. They like to get a two-state solution. But the Americans will back the Israelis, and Bibi Netanyahu is never going to uproot tens or scores of thousands of Israelis from the West Bank when he opposed withdrawing from Gaza a number of years ago. So I think we're just spinning our wheels, quite frankly, and until the Americans, or if the Americans get behind forcing something, and I'm not sure they could even do that, I don't think Benjamin Netanyahu and this hard right-wing government he's got is going to give up anything.
Yeah, I agree. And the Quartet supposedly was working on their plan since February. I didn't see one innovative idea in there. They're basically calling on the Israelis to stop the settlement expansion, which Netanyahu is not going to do. And they call upon the Palestinians to rein in terrorism, which the leadership there may be trying to do, but it's very difficult given the lack of opportunities. When you look at that map and you see how tiny Gaza is, and they're basically trapped in there without any economic opportunity, that's why I agree with Clarence that that island, if I believe that was truly an idea that might happen, that's the best thing to come out of this.
And that is one positive in a sea of, well, bad situations, in the sense of the West Bank settlement construction, Gaza, the continuing suffering there. I think the wall is a positive step in security, but the Gaza island would be positive because a lot of Europeans, for example, would travel there in order to support the Palestinian economy. And so if you have a relatively nice hotel, you can incentivize that and it moves things forward. But I think, you know, Netanyahu's cabinet, because of the deal he has now with an even more right, he's the moderate in the government, the potential for a peace in this, it's not going to happen.
So would you invest in a luxury resort off the coast of Gaza?
I'm going to see if Donald Trump is investing. Follow the money.
Trump Hotel there. Look, John, they got an airport in Gaza, I believe. Why don't they just open that up?
Why did Yasser Arafat make an historic mistake in rejecting a two-state agreement under the Oslo Accords?
That's very much in dispute as to how much he rejected, how much he was offered, but is at the end of Ehud Barak's term. I think it was the end of Bill Clinton's term. But they say he rejected it, and they say, well, he would never have accepted something. But I don't know whether he got an offer.
He was weak and corrupt, I think. Yeah. He didn't want to.
He didn't even want to negotiate, though. I mean, he was getting about 95% of what
Clinton
they'd been asking
and Barak
for.
did a great job, I think, with that deal, and he blew it for the Palestinians. Abbas, I think, would have signed it.
Well, the Israelis offered again.
The answer is yes. It will be at least another generation, maybe two, before the two sides are ready to agree on peace again. False prediction. Will Interior Minister Theresa May be Britain's next Prime Minister? Yes or no, Pat Buchanan?
Yes, despite what Tom thinks.
Yes, she'll be the next Margaret Thatcher.
No, I think Andrea Leeson, because of her support in the domestic constituencies.
I think yes.
I agree with you. I think she'll be Britain's first female prime minister since Margaret Thatcher. Bye-bye.